want to talk a little bit about your background, I'm very happy for you to do that. And then please take it away. We're looking at SEO and next generation discovery. It is something that our publishers actually asked for on the sustainability group. So I think we are, yeah, we're needing this discussion and this input. Over to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kate. I won't do any introduction to who I am. I think everybody knows me by now, but I will turn the camera on briefly just to say hi and then turn it off for bandwidth. And yeah, I mean, just to preface this by saying it is obviously a subject that there's a lot of interest in, quite rightly so, and there's only so much we can cover in the session today. So obviously this is going to be, so I'm going to try and touch on most aspects that I think are important, but I'd really encourage you to raise your hand, jump in with questions, keep it conversational. As long as I can get to kind of the end of the slides I put together, because there's some stuff at the end that is pretty important. So I wanted to start off. I'll turn the camera off. Can everybody hear me okay, please? Just make sure the microphone's working fine.
Perfect. We can definitely hear you. Thanks.
Okay, so really, I think this is a really important time to be having this conversation, because there's a lot of conversations happening at the moment about whether or not SEO still matters. And I think right now, as we're going into this process where most people in the call here are thinking about what they're going to be putting together for the DMT fund on Monday. Obviously, discovery, reaching more readers, and figuring out how to do that is absolutely critical to any pitch that involves that is looking at the underlying sustainability of the news business. And unfortunately, the timing is a little bit tricky, because what we are experiencing at the moment is this, and this is a chart, and I downloaded it from Search Console, which I'll talk a lot about later on this morning. This is taken from one of the websites that I work with. Say that it is, but it's very typical. It's an example of the way
Adam,
that, yeah.
Adam, sorry. I'm finding your audio. I don't know if it's just me. It could be just me, but I'm finding your audio a little bit scratchy. I don't know if other people are finding that.
It's not only you, Kate. I'm also getting the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know, Adam, if you can sort it a bit, but I mean, the way I'm describing it is scratchy, and I think Andile is confirming that.
No problem. Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic, cool.
Colleagues? So yeah, I think that's better. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, cool. I've put a headset on, so cool. Okay, so what I was saying was this is an example of the chart you see at the top of Google Search Console if you use Search Console, and what you can see in here. I don't have a pointer in Teams. Do I have a pointer? Is there something I can point to things? Can you see my cursor on the screen? Probably not.
No. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. I can't see your cursor, but yeah, please go ahead.
So basically, what you're looking at here is a chart of activity at Google for this particular website, and the purple line here is the total impressions. This is the number of times that a search request somebody has typed into Google has returned a page that includes a link to this site. And it doesn't matter where this site is. You can see here the average position is 18, which would be way down on page 2. If they appear as an answer to somebody's question in Google, it counts towards the total impressions number here. So this is the number of times their site has appeared in Google since the 20th of February this year through to the 20th of August yesterday. So they appeared in search results 5 million times, and of those 5 million times, 71,000 people clicked through to the website. So that's a click rate of 1.3%. And you can see this daily chart here, the graph at the bottom, breaks those numbers down into daily activity. So what you see is on the right-hand side of the chart, the number of impressions per day, and you can see that yesterday there were about 27 to 30,000 impressions roughly, the purple line, and then the light blue line is read off of the left-hand side of the graph here, the number of clicks through. And what this shows, if you look at it, is the challenge that we have as newsrooms with search results right now. And this is the increasing number of what we call zero-click searches. So even though over this period, the number of times this website has appeared in search results has stayed the same, and I've seen similar charts with other clients where the number of impressions has gone up. You know, their SEO is improving, they're appearing in more search results. There's a widening gap appearing between the two lines. If you look over at February, at the start of this chart, the two lines are very, very close together. And as you get down towards August, the two lines start to separate. And if you do the statistical analysis on it and look at it at a slightly more granular date range, you'll see that gap is slowly widening. And what's happening is that people are searching for results, and they're getting the answers in the generative AI overviews at the top of Google. They're not clicking through to anything once they get to Google. Once they get the answer to their result. So this is very real. This is very happening now, and what it means is that as we're thinking particularly about the DNT applications and your business in the next year to
off the bat, right? And I haven't thought about it deeply, but off the bat, I don't think.
Sorry, carry on.
Sorry, I think it was someone else suddenly intervened. Please go ahead, Adam.
Was that an intentional comment, or I'm happy to take comments if we're gonna. Okay.
Oh, I don't know. Sorry, I'm not sure.
Anyway, the point, so basically, this is something that, you know, there's no point at all developing a strategy and putting together a pitch that is based on what was true in February, because it is not true now, and this is only going to become more impactful as time goes on. This increasing number of zero-click searches and what it means for SEO. So the question is, obviously, does SEO still matter? Is it actually important that that we put any effort at all into SEO if our traffic from Google and other search engines is decreasing? And unfortunately, unfortunately or unfortunately, yes, it does still matter. And that's because even though the numbers are decreasing, for most websites, Google is still the single highest source of traffic to the website, certainly for first-time users, for the audience that we want to convert into loyal readers over time. And all of the other services that that Google provides, whether it's Google News, whether it's Google Discover, they all take into account traditional SEO techniques and requirements, as does, and we can chat a lot about this at the end of the session, generative search results and referrals from AI overviews and things like that, if that's something you want to target. So yes, it does matter, but it matters, and you have to make it matter for you in a very intentional way. You can't be random about this anymore. You've got to really think about why it matters and who it matters for in your audience to make it work properly. But first of all, I want to step back, because I want to just sort of talk about some myths of SEO and maybe kind of hopefully you know, help people understand where it comes from, why it's important, what it has done historically, and what it can do in the future. So first of all, let's talk about keywords. Everybody knows about keywords. Everybody uses keywords. I'm assuming most people here probably publish online using WordPress. and you probably add lots of tags in the WordPress box down here that relate to the story, because we know that, you may know or you may not know that whatever you enter here in the tags, that appears in the hidden header of your website as meta in the meta keywords section, and that gives some information about what the story is about to the search engine. So everybody's probably familiar with that. Anybody need more explanation on that? Please put your hands up. But I'm assuming everybody is kind of familiar with this. And so the question really is just to challenge you a little bit, because I imagine a lot of people here are doing that. When did Google stop using keywords to understand the content of an article? That is a question for you. Anybody got any idea as to when those tags stopped being read by Google, when it started ignoring them?
No idea. Do tell us.
Is anybody using those tags in the hope that Google will put them to the top of the search results for their story? Or does anybody think those tags are still being read by Google? That's right. There's no wrong answers. I'm not looking to name and shame people. Okay, so the answer is 1998. So basically, pretty much as long as, I don't know if anybody here has been publishing for longer than 27 years online, but those meta tags, Google started ignoring them in 1998, because as soon as people realized that this was one of the ways that Google was indexing pages, they started trying to game the system and stuffing articles with keywords, stuffing the tags with keywords, and trying to game the search engine and appear at the top of the result because of all the lovely keywords. So Google stopped using the meta tag keyword to understand the content of an article 27 years ago. And I think, if you're still doing that as a publisher, and nobody suggested they were or weren't, but I imagine a few people are doing it, but just haven't admitted it. Unfortunately, it has no impact at all on SEO. Yeah, go ahead, Anton. Yeah.
Hi,
Yeah.
I want to backtrack a bit. Well, I guess firstly, sort of on the issue of meta tags. I mean, I think what we don't use them, but the original idea is, yes, and we are actually probably the only publisher publishing online for more than 27 years. We started in 1997, so we precede Google. But the meta tags, would that not be the idea of linking your own story? So obviously, when a person sort of visit the website, and you would get you'd be also interested in this, or linking, like for instance, court cases, saying, okay, well, this is like a previous story. So it's not just for the sake of Google to find you. But
Yeah.
leaving that, I actually want to, I don't know if you, maybe it's sort of still coming, but you already started by using a lot of terminology, like obviously clicks, but it seems like from previous discussion, there's uncertainty in terms of, what's the difference between a page view, like previously called it hits, but nowadays luckily people don't use hits anymore. I mean, there's so many confusing terminology, and people saying, I've got like millions and millions of whatever, but it doesn't really go back to the number of real people, not bots, visiting your site. So I don't know if you maybe want to just spend 5 minutes in expanding on the terminology used.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and it's a very valid point. And the tags are still useful because they give us an opportunity to sort content, and you can create a page of stories that all tag Department of Education if you're doing an education special, for example. So they're very, very useful internally, and they are still kind of useful for search engines as well, because if the site is well set up, every tag will have a sitemap that is published on the server, which again is not really something humans read, but the search engines will pick up on the sitemap and say, oh, you've got a sitemap called education. Here's all the articles that you've done related to education. And that helps to build up your domain authority, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So they are still important, but they're just not important from if I put the keyword Cyril Ramaphosa in here, that doesn't mean Google's going to instantly bounce you to the top of search results for questions about Cyril Ramaphosa, and I think there are still publishers who think that is the case, and mainly because there's really bad advice out there. The information on SEO is terrible on the internet, and it is complicated and hard to understand. On the question of what the different metrics are. So this is not measuring, this particular chart comes from Google Search Console. So this is not measuring activity on your site. This is not Google Analytics. In Google Analytics, you'll typically see, we typically focus on the two key metrics in Google Analytics, the number of users on sites, which hopefully, most bots are intelligently excluded from. And then the number of page views. So those two numbers should be different because one visitor should read more than one page. Where the number of visitors and the number of page views is very similar, there's probably a bit of an issue because that means people are only reading one page and leaving the site and not really engaging beyond that. So you've got somebody who's clicked once, read an article, and then left. They're not turning into loyal readers over time. So there's a lot of signals we can pick up from comparing users and page views, and in the old terminology, I think the hit was kind of analogous to a page view. So one user might create 3 hits when they arrive on site if they've viewed 3 pages. But I haven't heard hits for a long time. I don't think people use that too much. What you're seeing here is direct measurement from Google Search itself. This is Google. This is available to any website. You don't have to have Google Analytics installed. If your website appears in Google Search results, you can see the total impressions in Search Console is the total number of times you appeared in Google Search. This does not mean somebody read your website. It just means your headline appeared in a search result. So if I Googled for what was the outcome of the national dialogue, what was it called? The National Convention on National Dialogues for National People. I don't know what it was. I can't even remember what it was called. But if I Googled for information about that big conference that happened over the weekend, and you appeared in the search results for that because you did an article from the convention center, you would appear as an impression. If I clicked on it, you would appear as a click. So usually what we should see is that the total number of clicks measured at Google Search Console is more or less the same as the total number of people arriving at the website from Google in Google Analytics. So when you look at the acquisition channels in Google Analytics, there's a cohort of people in there that will be defined as having arrived at the site from Google Search, and that number should equal the, more or less, because these things are never 100% accurate, it should more or less equal the total clicks coming from Google Search Console. So they're measuring different things, and it's quite useful because it means that you've got 2 data points to make sure that they're configured correctly. If your website is recording half as many users coming from Google Search as Search Console says that there is coming, or twice as many, it means there's a problem with the way analytics is set up on your site. So it's also useful in that sense. But just looking at search itself, again, I think it's useful to kind of understand. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Kate.
Adam, yeah, just one quick issue. I'm just thinking, that the point that Anton is making is very important in terms of just like, basically, if we had a number of the, as you say, impressions, clicks, etc., like
Mhm.
what do they mean? And just a sheet which has those kind of definitions, on them would be super helpful to kind of
Yeah.
just send round to everybody. So I don't know if you have something like that, but just to explain some of these basic concepts, I think would be useful. So just a
Yeah.
suggestion, and maybe we can chat about it after this meeting. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. I believe there is one in the toolkits that Chris put together as part of the community media publishing services website.
Okay,
I think
perfect.
I think
We'll
there is
speak
a
to Chris.
glossary on there, but if not, we can definitely. I've got loads of materials on this because I do see publishers. Publishers do send me emails that. Because Search Console will send you an email every month and tell you whether your search visibility is better or worse than the previous month. And I do see publishers forward me this, and they go, "Hey, look, I got 5 million impressions last month. Isn't that amazing?" And if you've got 5 million impressions, but your average position is at number 18 and your click-through rate is just 1%, then it's not amazing. This is not great at all. These numbers. This means that you're appearing in search and people aren't clicking on you. That's an issue, but fortunately it's an issue we can address with SEO. This is exactly what what we want to address with SEO. If we see a big gap, a click-through rate of less than sort of 4 or 5%, this is where we can start using the tools and techniques of SEO to try and improve that a bit, with the caveat that the click rate is going to go down in the future. So to a certain extent, we're going to be running to stand still, but we're also going to be using the same tools to open up other opportunities for new readers as well.
Thanks.
So
Brilliant. I'll speak
yeah.
to Chris and also then just checking with
Yeah.
you as well, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah. I can see Chris has just joined, but I'm sure there's a glossary on that website that explains it already. So I just wanted to again go back to a little bit about the brief history of search, just to kind of, because I think a lot of people's understanding of how Google works is, if they have an understanding of how Google works, is probably, again, like the keywords issue, anchored back in how Google began and how it used to organize search results back in the early days. And what was happening in the early days, if anybody is as old as me or older, we had search engines like Yahoo, AltaVista, Jeeves, etc. And these search engines were more or less manually curated. If you had a category for technology, then the results in that category would be manually curated. If you had a category for particular types of e-commerce, the results would be manually curated. And of course, as the internet grew, as the World Wide Web grew, that became an impossible job. There just weren't enough people to read every website and categorize it and put it into the search engine. So search became very, very messy. It was very hard to get listed in search, and if you're not listed in search, you're invisible to users and potential readers. And Google's big breakthrough that made the company was the PageRank algorithm. And the basis of PageRank was to say, we are going to give every article and every publisher essentially a quality score based on the number of people who link to them. So if lots of people link to you, we're going to take that as a signal that the content you've written is quite good, because the internet, it's a link economy. Everything about the internet is about, the keyword is inter. It is all interconnected, interlinked. If you're not linking off of your website to other websites, you're making a mistake. You're not protecting your content and stopping readers leaving. You're creating an artificial walled garden that is actually hurting your authority as a publisher. Because we can cross-reference, we can link out, we can bring in knowledge from other sources. And that openness is what makes the internet amazing. So Google's breakthrough was to see this and to say, well, if a lot of people are linking to your content, we're going to give you a high score in the PageRank algorithm. We're going to effectively put you at the top of search results. And if your articles consistently have high scores, any link from you to another source, we're going to use as another signal to suggest that that source you're linking to is also quality, because you're a publisher who clearly knows what they're talking about. Lots of people link to you, so when you link out, you have, you know, a multiplier effect on the links in you to that other website. The website you link to might go up 10 places instead of 1 place based on one of your links. So very, very elegant, really, you know, quite beautiful in its simplicity, and it really, really worked. It was a fantastic breakthrough that made Google infinitely more usable and more enjoyable and simpler and quicker to get to the answer you're looking for than anybody else out there. And that's how Google started to grow exponentially fast as a company. Back in the do no evil days. The problem with PageRank is that as soon as I tell you how it works, you're going to try and game it. It's like keywords. So what the impact of PageRank was very quickly was to spawn this sub-industry of link farming. And even now I get people telling me, hey, we've had 5 emails this week from publishers who want us to write guest posts linking to them, and you know, they'll link to us if we publish this post, and that's just spam. That's just machine-generated spam, and it's from the old days of the internet when these link farms grew up to basically cross-reference each other, try and provide PageRank magic and PageRank juice to each other's sites, and then they would try and publish guest posts on your site in order to get link backs from them to use your PageRank authority to basically boost their sites in the eyes of Google. And just like keywords, Google figured this out pretty quickly. You know, they're really not stupid, the people who work on Google search. You know, link farming started pretty much with the birth of PageRank, and yet even now, nearly 30 years later, link farms still exist because there's still people who believe this is the way to get to the top of Google search, but it doesn't work like that anymore. And if this is how you're kind of conceptualizing Google search, it's not how it works anymore. PageRank is still part of the algorithm, I believe. We obviously don't know exactly how the algorithm works. PageRank is a little part of it, but really for the last 15 years, Google has been trying to introduce a much more semantic model for understanding what is in a web page, and they developed the knowledge graph as part of their whack-a-mole with people gaming the search algorithm. And the knowledge graph is basically a massive encyclopedia that sits on Google search servers, which cross-references and links in you can visualize it as a giant mind map. You know, specific subjects, specific objects within internet content, and tries to establish links between all of these things, and you can see knowledge graph because when you type in a search result and you see, you know, if I type in a search result for Nelson Mandela, I'll see a little biography of Nelson Mandela on the right hand side of the screen with a link to Wikipedia and some other links. Or if I Google the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, I'll see some information about that business on the right hand side of the screen and some links there. And that's Google's knowledge graph. That's what it bases a lot of its search understanding on, those tags. And you can correct that if you Google for your own business. And you see your own business in the knowledge graph results on the right hand side there, you can offer feedback and correct it and change the, you know, suggest changes to the way Google sees you or your community that you're publishing about. You know, if there's something about the geographic area it's getting wrong or hasn't included in its knowledge graph about that area, you can see what is there and correct it. And this is really kind of forms the basis of how search works today. Combined with, you know, thousands and thousands of other signals. So when we're thinking about keywords in SEO, they're still important. It's still important that Google understands what your content is about. In the same way, it's important that a reader understands what your story is about. And really good SEO is just thinking about the search engine as just another reader. If I can read your article and I can really clearly understand, the salient points about the 5 W's and 1 H of where it is happening, what it's about, the search engine probably can as well. You don't need to go overboard with keyword stuffing. That is very hacky SEO, and it doesn't work anymore. The biggest challenge for news publishers is that most of what we do has no SEO value in the first place. And the biggest frustration I hear from publishers is that they want to appear in Google more often. But you're not putting yourselves in the shoes of, or in the eyes, or in my case, the glasses of the reader, because when the reader goes to Google, they're not looking for news. Generally speaking, we know from all of the reports Reuters does and other people find news through other sources, either directly because they're a news website visitor, or more likely because they've been forwarded something on WhatsApp. Also likely, but slightly less likely these days, is they've seen a news story on Facebook or TikTok. And so on. So SEO search engine optimization can only impact the content people are actually looking for at the search engine. If there's a big breaking story, if I'm interested in what's happening at the National Convention, put loads of SEO effort into that story, because people are going to be Googling for it. They're going to be looking to see what's happening. Maybe that's a really bad example because nobody really cares about that one. But, if it's the budget or Sonar or an election, these things have SEO value. These are the kinds of questions people go to Google for. But generally speaking, if it's a story, if it's a local story that nobody knows about in the first place, they're not looking for that on Google. We still have to reach those readers. We still have to get that content in front of people to bring them to the website. But SEO is not going to work its magic there. It's not worth putting in huge amounts of effort from an SEO point of view if that's the key story. Where it really matters, I think, right now, is with some of the most exciting journalism that's happening, and particularly at the community level. There's a wonderful crossover with search engine optimization and solutions journalism or service journalism. If I have questions, Google is a question and answer machine. That's why generative search works. That's why the AI overviews at the top of Google work. Because when I go to Google, I want an answer to a question. Most Google searches start with a question: what is, how does, who is. They don't start with tell me the latest news in Ramsgate. I might ask a question about who is on the local council, who is my local representative. I have questions, the kinds of questions that fall into service journalism, or I might be looking for the kinds of solutions, the kind of in-depth digs that solutions journalism gives us. And these are the kinds of content that SEO can really, really help with, because here we really do want to be the first result in the search engine results for specific questions. So at the top of the funnel, when we think of an audience funnel, who our casual readers are. Even though search is becoming less important, optimizing for search isn't going away. There's always going to be an opportunity, I think, and maybe the opportunity will grow again as people get tired of AI overviews or don't trust AI overviews. That's my hopeful look at the future. But I don't think SEO is going away, even though it's going to have slightly diminished returns in the short term, in respect of traffic coming directly from search engines. But as I said, even if that traffic is dying off, other top of the funnel sources, Google Discover, generative search, AI is indexing you and trying to understand what your content is about. Google News, all of those other tools that people use to find news publishers or stumble across news publishers if they're not actively finding news publishers. SEO techniques and SEO practices are still really important for these things, because at its heart, it's really just about saying, this is what this story is about. This is why it's the best story to answer a particular question. And here is all of the information you need to know about this story in order to give it an appropriate place in your page ranking. And there is a multiplier on here, which I'll come to that in a second. So let me come back to that. But just I mentioned the audience funnel. A few people have probably seen this rather rubbish diagram before. If I've worked with you at all in the past. But when we talk about the audience funnel, just to clarify that, you can think about your audience as being very highly segmented. Your casual users at the top here, people who read one article and never come back, loyal readers who may come back 2 or 3 times a month, and then people at the bottom of the funnel, the people who really think of themselves as being a Globe Post reader or an Limpopo Mirror reader, for who their news consumption is part of their personal identity. And when we talk about growing sustainable news businesses, we're talking about growing the number of brand lovers at the bottom of the funnel, which inevitably means the funnel is always this shape. We do need to bring more people in at the top of the funnel. And this is where the top of the funnel is where SEO has particular value, because this is where we're thinking about how do we get people to the website in the first place? What kind of stories are going to work for search engines to bring people in? The challenge once they're in there is bringing them down and converting them to loyal readers, and that's a different challenge altogether. The one exception to that, and this is quite a big topic at the moment, and comes up quite a lot in SEO for news discussions, is brand search. And what that means is that there is probably a very high proportion of your really core audience at the bottom of the audience funnel who find you using Google every day. They search for Muslim views because they don't type muslimviews.co into their web browser. They open the browser up, it opens up on Google, and they type into Google Muslim views, and then they click on the first link. That doesn't mean they are a casual user at the top of the funnel. It means they're engaging in branded search. So when you're looking at those search results in Search Console, what we should be looking for, and what is really good, is if a high proportion of searches are people looking specifically for your organization. That means people know you, that means people are looking for you, that means people are trying to find you. So understanding and unpicking, what we see in the specific Google searches and the specific pages people are landing on from Google can tell us an awful lot about what our audience is and how much value there is in different kinds of readers. So if most websites I work with, they have pretty good branded search, but they really struggle on everything else. There are a couple, particularly in the technology sector, where they have, really good search visibility for what is the latest iPhone or what's the best contract from MTN. But they don't have very strong brand visibility. People are not looking specifically for them in search, and that's a problem, because it means their traffic is spiky and is not high value traffic if they're looking at long-term sustainability. Sorry, I hate the word traffic. I'm really sorry. I shouldn't use it. Any questions so far? Yeah, go ahead, Anton.
Yep. Just maybe you touch on it later, specifically the LLMs, AI. Mm-hmm. Is there any way of tracking, like you've done with sort of the Google search in terms of the impressions? But how do you actually sort of track how many of the LLMs picked up on you when Perplexity sort of shows it there, and Claude, something like that? But it's not very transparent. And even going back even further, how do you try and ensure that you are actually picked up by the LLMs, which can be obviously good and bad, but I mean, is there any sort of like a SOE, or sorry, SEO? Is there also a similar sort of strategy that you can follow to try and sort of get you listed in the various AI programs?
So funnily enough, and again, you know, these are closed algorithms. We don't know how they work, but there is some research on this, and it's what it suggests is that the LLMs do read and understand. They don't understand anything. They do look at and take into account the traditional technical SEO stuff, so the structured data in the heading and things like that. And so good SEO practice is also, you know, probably good generative search practice. But I think what you're saying is, you know, you kind of touched on it there, that and you know, I've got a I was going to talk about this at the end, but it's got to be a very intentional business decision. Do you want to try and be listed in generative search? And there are some consequences to that. You know, I've been struggling with websites that when they stop blocking LLM bots, they just get knocked offline because the influx of traffic is just huge, because they're constantly being hammered by LLMs re-indexing, because the LLMs don't act like Google search. They don't keep a separate database of information. They're constantly refreshing, and you know, particularly, I'm getting bogged down in jargon now, I'm really sorry, but particularly with the agentic, the agent-like LLMs, you know, they perform a search every time, and I'm seeing websites really struggling with that. So, and what most sites are doing, and what Cloudflare has done, is to say, look, the payoff of upgrading your servers and trying to cope with that influx of traffic, it's not worth it. It's not bringing traffic back from LLMs, which brings me back to your question. The traffic from LLMs, if it's coming from ChatGPT, Gemini, Cloud, Perplexity, it will appear in Google Analytics. It will appear as a source in Google Analytics. For the most part, I don't think any LLM is generating traffic for publishers other than ChatGPT. I think for the general public, ChatGPT is generative search, and the traffic it is bringing in is so tiny as to be negligible. The biggest growth in traffic at the moment is Google Discover, and that's very problematic because Google Discover is inherently spiky and hard to rely on, and one day as you know, one of our publishers here can attest to, one day you can have 1 million people coming from Google Discover, and the next day they vanish almost overnight. So it is difficult, and I think it's a question of making intentional decisions as to what you want to try and where you want to try and appear, and then using the tools of SEO to try and make that happen. And it's all trial and error. You know, there are no guarantees. Unfortunately, you can have perfect SEO technical stuff and follow all of the advice on content, and it still not work, because there's no guarantees. Sorry, Mahmoud, go ahead.
So thanks, Adam. 2 questions. One is, if 2 people in 2 different locations and 2 different devices enter exactly the same keyword, for example, the title of my newspaper, am I correct to assume they will get different results? That I typically get Muslim views right at the top. Does it mean somebody else will get a different result because the algorithms are different?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely does. So because it's, if you, at least if you're using Google search, so there is a big increase. You know, my favorite search engine, my default these days is startpage.com, but there's also Kaggy and Brave is very good. DuckDuckGo, people will be familiar with. That there's quite a big increase in users or internet users turning to those privacy-focused search engines which don't collect data on your activity, and they're more likely to be, you know, give you similar results for different from different people for the same query. But Google is all about personalization. You know, Google Discover is the kind of the last word in personalization, but search definitely takes into account what Google knows about you. And if you use Google products, if you use the Chrome browser, if you use Gmail, if you are logged into Gmail whilst you're browsing, Google knows everything about you. So it certainly knows if you are a Muslim Views reader, and will certainly, you know, prioritize that publication over, say, 972 magazine or somebody publishing similar kinds of content at the same time. Which is why it's worth looking into, and I'll mention them later on. It's worth looking into tools like Ahrefs and SEMrush, and I'll share all these links at the end, so don't worry about if you've missed them. But you know, the professional SEO tools, because they do give you a more balanced view of you know, how people see your site. And there's one very good one which is, it still costs a little bit, but it's a one-off payment for lifetime use, rather than hundreds of dollars a month for SEMrush and Ahrefs, and that's Ubersuggest, which would be my recommendation, just because it is cheap. But I have got a couple of slides on those, and I'll push on. So basically, yeah. So just pushing on. What do you need to know about SEO? News SEO is not like other SEO. Most of the advice you see on the internet is for general SEO, for optimizing general content sites, for helping e-commerce or service businesses use content marketing to appear near the top of the results. If I'm looking for an air conditioner, you know, I'm an air conditioning company. I probably have a blog to try and increase my my Google juice and bring people from Google through content marketing. News websites, they fall into, for a large part, our content falls into what Google calls your money, your life, as in this is really serious and we have to get it right. The keywords that that are important to us, you know, the topics that are important, they're very highly contested. You know, if you publish a story about the National Convention, you are fighting for space against every other news publisher in the country who's also publishing stories about the National Convention. And changes to the algorithm are not always signaled. So we might be doing something right one day, the algorithm changes, and we don't generally know about algorithm changes until after they've happened. So we might need to shift our tactics and change them regularly. You know, we can't, SEO is not a once-off thing, because the algorithm's always changing. You know, this year everything is changing. We don't even know what best practice is right now, to a certain extent, because the dust is still very much left to settle on generative AI. It's very likely over the next few weeks we're going to see some very significant changes in the US economy, where people have been throwing billions and trillions of dollars into generative AI, and services are going to stop happening because they're just too expensive to run. But again, we can't predict the future like that. We can only react to what we know. So so basically, stay informed. Great resource, W2F is SEO. Fantastic weekly newsletter written by 2 Canadian journalists who are both fantastic and lovely and incredibly open and helpful about what works and what doesn't, and really on the ball. And really the best advice comes from Google itself. You know, what Google is looking for when it creates page rank, when it ranks an article or a site now is not basic PageRank stuff. What it's looking for is what it calls EAT. It used to be EAT, it is now EAT, and that stands for experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. And this is great, I think, because this is what we should be doing as news publishers. You know, if we have a value proposition or a mission statement or a vision statement for our publication, those 4 words would all be very, very deserving of a place in that. Our businesses should be providing experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. That is what we do. So having this as a target for Google, I think, is good, because we should know how to produce this. Specifically for Google, what this means is experience. Have you personally covered this subject before? You know, do you have a track record of publishing about this that Google can cross-reference? This is why things like author data and author boxes really need to be updated and used correctly, because expertise is linked to experience. Google is also looking to see if the author of a piece has a relevant qualification. If you're writing about the relative merits of the Human Development Index versus GDP as a measure of national wealth, health, and well-being, it's probably useful in Google's eyes if you are a development economist or have experience at the World Bank. And it knows, you know, that's what the knowledge graph is for. The knowledge graph is constantly being updated and creating these links in the search engine's understanding of what credentials you have. You know, if your credentials aren't academic, do you have 27 years experience of digital publishing? Yes, then your blog post should be raised a little bit higher. Slightly trickier are authority and trustworthiness, because these are looking not just at the PageRank aspects of, you know, who is linking to you, and that is still a ranking factor. You know, are the sites linking to you quality websites? It's also looking at the technical quality of your website. If there's a lot of typos, or, you know, there's a lot of images missing or broken links, 404 pages, if the design and the HTML code is really poor and overloaded, if you're running 26 WordPress plugins just to generate 1 page of news, you know, all of these things are taken as signals for Google when it comes to authority. Are you a professional outfit? Do you actually look like somebody who should be publishing? Are you publishing with a free WordPress theme that hasn't been updated for 10 years? You know, these are all real world examples, and real world examples of signals that do not suggest quality and authority. One of the big things around trustworthiness is, are you accountable? Do you have contact details on your website? I know a lot of us don't like to put contact details on our website because we don't want spam emails and spam phone calls, but it is something Google, we believe, looks for when it's looking at trustworthiness. Can I contact you to correct an article? You know, and most importantly, everything is mobile. If your website looks fantastic and loads quickly on desktop, but you haven't checked out the mobile site, and the first thing you see on the mobile site is a pop-up ad that takes over the whole web page, or an exit ad that stops people from leaving when they're trying to get away. You know, these are all negative signals for Google. It's looking for a great mobile experience first and foremost. And again, that isn't sure anymore. What Google really wants to do is not link out at all. It wants to keep everybody on Google. But, you know, this is still true as far as you know, search goes, and search isn't going away completely. So in practice, there's this is not me. This comes from a big 3-year-long research project by the Stanford Web Credibility, called the Stanford Web Credibility Research Project, which was 3 years long. It looked at search results for 4,500 participants over that period of time. And they came up with kind of these 10 points that seem to impact the Google algorithm, the undocumented parts of the algorithm. Make it easy for people to vary the accuracy of the information on your site. Link out. Everybody hates putting links into their articles because they think it means readers are going to go away. It's a really, really bad practice to do that. Putting links in your articles means that you're backing up what you say. It means you have evidence and you can link to that evidence. It's what readers are looking for. In this respect, Google is no different from a regular reader. If I see you can back up what you say, I trust you as a news organization. So link out. Show that there's a real organization behind your site. We know that's a big problem growing all over the world, particularly in South Africa. We're getting pop-up news organizations full of AI spam. So the more we can prove our own credentials, the more we can talk about ourselves, the more we can constantly hammer this message home that we have authority, that we have been in this region, we've been in this area for 30 years. Make it obvious. Don't hide it away or expect readers in Google to know that. Again, this is not just SEO 101. This is marketing 101. This is how to sell a news website to readers these days. Highlight the expertise in your organization and the content and services you provide. Author bio pages, author categories, things like that, and so on and so on and so on. So this is just kind of repeating what we said with the EEAT overview, but this is a third party just verifying that this isn't just Google saying that. It really does work in practice. Google also publishes a document, if you really want to read it, the rater guidelines. Some pages go for manual checking when they're indexed. Not everything is algorithmic, and Google produces quite a long document that tells human raters how to verify the algorithm selection. So part of the machine learning is on there. Some of the stuff that tells us, and there's also a chap called I've forgotten his name. I can't believe I've forgotten his name. Google's head of search, who's very open and talks a lot. Also, it talks about this stuff a lot. What they talk about is, and if you saw that thing I put into the WhatsApp the other day, low text to ad ratios are bad. If you've got lots of ads and not much text, you're a low quality spam site. If you've got adverts above the fold on mobile, in other words, if the first thing readers see is an advert, you're a low quality website. If you've got links that stop people can't click out of your website without being presented by a Taboola page or something like that, you're a low quality website. And whilst some people like News24 can get away with it just because they have the sheer volume of content, for a small publisher trying to compete, we have to compete on quality. We have to compete on quality. Putting 20 ads on your page is not going to earn you more money if it means nobody is reading you because Google's decided not to index you. But you've got to think about it intentionally. You've got to look at the numbers and constantly evolve your strategy around this. So I'm kind of glossing over stuff now because we're running out of time. Other good SEO tactics, cornerstone content and explainers. What people go to Google for is answers to questions. So if you've got answers to questions, make it really obvious. Explainer articles are really good. I wouldn't turn your website into just doing explainer articles, but as a strategy for bringing people in. They're really good. They also help regular readers because they're simple to read. They lay out the facts about something in a way that establishes your authority as the people to talk about it. So for a while I worked with openuponevictions.org, and we did a lot of work to make sure that some of our articles on there were really clearly answering the questions people had in Google. We saw lots of people were arriving at the site with questions about how to contest your eviction. So we made sure there was an article on the website alongside the technical chapters of the eviction guide that said, here is how you oppose your eviction, and spelled it out in questions and answers that the machine reads, because Google's algorithm looks for headlines in a post. The first thing Google reads is the H1 headline. The second thing it reads are the other crossheads within the article, and the last thing it reads is the first couple of 100 words of the article itself. It probably won't read the whole article. So you need to make sure that the salient details, the reasons you should be indexed for a particular subject, are in those elements: the H1 headline, the crossheads, and the first paragraph of an article. Again, this is tactical. This is about those stories you think have good SEO value. You don't need to do this for everything. If you're writing a story about the local school sports day, there's probably not a lot of Google value in that, and you want to present that differently because it's a different audience that's going to be reading it. It's still an important story, still going to be loved by your community of readers, but they're going to find it through WhatsApp or a different channel. They're not going to find it from Google. If you've got readers who are being evicted, if the red ants are in your area, a story about how to oppose eviction, where to get help if you're in court, that is something that's going to be found through Google. That is worth spending the time to get that story in the right shape for SEO from that point of view. Sorry, Mahmoud, I saw you posted a thing. So 5 articles today. It doesn't really matter. It's again, it's one of those things that frequency is important. Google does want fresh content, and if an article is old, there is a kind of assumption that it may not be true anymore. If I'm telling you how to contest your eviction today, and I'm trying to do it with an article that's 10 years old, who knows what's changed in legal terms. For a news website, it's more important to have the right schema, the right structured data in the header that says I'm a news website, because then Google will index you very, very quickly as soon as you publish. The volume of articles, I'm not convinced it matters. I did a study when I was on Mail and Guardian where we had we had a relatively high volume of articles compared to community publishers, certainly, because we had a bigger team back then. And the new editor wanted to increase, the number of articles being published by threefold, because they strongly believed that was going to increase traffic coming from Google. And so we pulled the numbers and we said, look, there kind of is a threshold. If we publish less than 5 stories a day, we don't get so much traffic, but anything over 5 stories a day, it doesn't make a difference whether we publish 15 stories or 10 stories. Quality is better than quality, exactly. I think one of the other things to do when we're thinking about that cornerstone content is to think about one challenge is if we've published lots of stories about the same subject, how do we stop fighting ourselves to be the top of Google? If we have 5 stories with kind of middling ranking, it's not as good as having 1 story with top ranking. So how do we, a good way to think about, if I'm consistently writing about the local council, is to have one landing page that links together all of those articles and try to give Google as clear a signal as possible that if you're going to index one article from my site about Ugu authority municipality, this is the one to go for. Sorry, Kate, I see you've turned your camera on. I think it's because we're over the hour, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got me 100% right. So I'm just asking, so colleagues, do we need another 10 minutes? Adam? Do we need another?
I could talk all day about this is the problem.
Okay, so I think no, of course. So
Yeah.
I think what we're going to do, colleagues, then is if we can finish let's finish at 11:15 if everyone's okay about that. And please go ahead, Adam. Thanks.
Cool. So just to kind of to round up, there's two important aspects to think about when you're thinking about SEO and thinking about how to actually optimize an article, not just for the search engine, but also for Google Discover and for LLMs. The first is the technical side of it. And as I said, that involves making sure you've got the correct HTML structure, that the HTML structure is clear. If you use a lot of WordPress plugins, that the HTML gets very, very overloaded. You end up with a lot of what you'll see in the page speed insights test, a lot of very overloaded DOM structure. So clean, fast loading websites that don't have a lot of unnecessary HTML. And the most important thing, I think, is this structured metadata using schema.org specifications. And that's kind of replaced the old metadata, which was the tags in the heading, those meta keyword tags, meta author tags. It's still good practice to put those into a website, but the structured data is a very specific format that says, I am a news publisher. This is a news article. This is the author of the news article. This is the subjects the news article covers. You can use it to declare whether or not the content is paywalled. So you can give Google content of the article to index, but put in the structured metadata, structured data that the article is paywalled. That's why News 24 articles get into Google Discover, even though you can't read them, because they're using all of this data in the header of the web page that humans don't see. And that's correctly structured. And again, we believe the LLMs read this and also use this to decide what is going to feature in generative search results. And this is, I mean, it sounds very complex and technical, but most of the SEO plugins for WordPress, you know, they have this feature to switch the schema data on and to configure that on a per page basis. You can, you know, tell it that any article in sponsored content is not a news article, for example, and it will just do that automatically from them. So to your second question, around plugins like Rank Math, I do not use those plugins to do keyword analysis or look at any of the tools that they shout about that say, you know, you're not focused on this keyword, or you know, you've got a green traffic light versus a red traffic light for readability. All of those decisions are mine as an editor to make. I might be editing a publication targeted at academics, and I don't care about readability. So it's that you can use those as a tool if you want, but I would use them as a tool more from an editor's point of view of is this a good article generally. From an SEO point of view, what they do is they give you some real superpowers. They give you the ability to put the schema data into the structured data into your website headers without any technical knowledge, but they also generally give you do I have a slide? I don't think I think I took the slide on this out for time switch. They also give the ability to publish an article with multiple different images, headlines, and excerpts for different platforms. So with Rank Math or Yoast or Smart Crawl or any of those plugins, what you'll see at the bottom of an article when it's activated is you have an option to change the title for Google, and it will show you how a story will appear in a Google search result. And that means you can have one headline for the website and a different headline for Google. So you might think about restructuring the headline as a question for Google, for example, but not as a question for the website, because you think your regular readers to the website, that's not what they're looking for. But then you can also customize the question for what they call the Open Graph protocol, and that's what Facebook reads. And we believe, we don't have hard evidence for this, but we have some numbers to back it up. And I'm using the royal we, and that other people have this. I identify as a member of the SEO community now after years of trying to avoid it. But we believe that when Google Discover is taking a headline, it uses the Open Graph headline. So if you send a different headline to Google, to Open Graph for Facebook, that's probably the one Google Discover is going to pick up on. And there is a difference in terms of the types of content that work in Google Discover and the types of content that work in Google Search, because Discover is much more, what kinds of articles are you personally going to be interested in reading today? It tends not to be breaking news or hard news, but it does tend to be stories that are inspirational, lifestyle-y, curiosity baiting. I don't want to say clickbaity because that's not fair. Articles that pique my curiosity, if they're good articles, they're not clickbait. So, but those kinds of headlines tend to work in Google Discover. So you can use Rank Math or Yoast or Smart Crawl to give the same article different headlines. And again, think intentionally. How is a reader on Discover going to see this if they see this? How is a reader on Google going to see this if they see this? And again, you're not going to have time to do this for every single article you publish. But for those articles where it matters, so you think it's going to matter, it's worth putting in those extra 10 or 15 minutes to think about different ways to phrase or pitch the article to different audiences. And then the other part of it, the SEO, is on-page SEO. And that is, I think we've spoken about this mostly, this is making sure that, Google can understand what the article's about. If you've got a long and meandering intro that talks about 15th century architecture before bringing it back to the point that your article is actually about the rebuilding of the Parliament building, the search engine, like most readers, will probably have got bored and wandered off before it gets to understanding what the actual article is about. So again, in most cases, good SEO is just good writing. It's just what is good writing? How do we entertain, engage, and delight our readers and be clear about what it is they're about to read, so they get to the end of it? And it's the same process with the search engines. Downside is that search engines don't really like clever titles and irony in subheadings. They like things to be very clear and spelled out because they're machines and they don't have a sense of humor. So it's an editorial decision. Are you looking to grow your search traffic? Are you looking to delight the readers that are going to be in on the jokes that you share in your headlines? And both are valid, but they can't both be true at the same time. And we have to kind of accept there are those compromises when publishing. That there's no silver bullet that's going to cure everything. So I'll wrap up and just say that at the end of this, there's some tools to look at and some advice for tools to look at. Uber Suggest, I mentioned earlier, is great for figuring out what people are looking for and which sites they're going to find it. So is Google Trends, although Google Trends tends to be not so useful for us because it doesn't focus in on our areas. And then I've also got a load of links in here as to places you can get much better information than anything I can share with you, because these people are more intelligent than me, and Danny Sullivan is the guy from Google that I was trying to remember earlier. I'm happy to hang around for a little bit to carry the conversation on, but we're over already, so please don't feel difficult you have to.
So thank you very much, Adam. I mean, that's super helpful. I want to take just one question if there is. Otherwise, then, what I'll do is we'll obviously send this recording out. Adam, also, it would be great if to send out the presentation to everybody as well. And I've just had a quick back chat with Chris, and Chris is saying that he will assist us with a kind of glossary of terms, which we can then send out to everybody as well. So I don't know if there's like one final question, colleagues, before we end this call. And yeah, look, let's also, Adam, have further chats, and colleagues have further chats about any other issues that we want to dive into in greater depth. But yeah, any final questions? And if not, then just a big warm thank you to Adam, and yeah, we will take this forward, and thanks, Adam, for the presentation. Super.
No
Take care,
problem. I
everybody.
hope it was useful. I hope it was a worthwhile use of your time, folks.
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right. Thanks so much. See
Cool.
everybody soon.
Cheers. All.
Bye.
Goodbye.